we are discussing the test 2 on the skeletal program. So the very first question is, the Indian national movement developed a complex and sophisticated critique of the basic features of India's colonial economy. So basically in this question everybody has written about the Dadabhai Naoroji and some of them have written also about the Arsidda. So basically, and some of you are writing about the features of the colonial economy. That is not required in the question. So what is required in the question, that you will have to talk about the critique of the British colonial era in the terms of economic exploitation. So now here what you can introduce, in introduction you can talk about the moderates criticism, or you can say that moderates have tried to expose the real intention of the British. And what was the real intention? You can mention in your introduction, that is the economic exploitation of the colonies. After that, and then you can in the introduction itself you can write that this exposure of this particular economic exploitation was started by Dadabhai Naoroji, and in his drain of wealth theory. After this you will come to your body, and in the drain of wealth theory you will talk about the home charges as one of the point, and in the home charges you will talk about that how the pensions, how the payments of the British officers were going from the Indian treasury. Then you can talk about the land revenue that was high, and that is resulting into the poverty of the peasant. Then you can talk about the trade. One-way trade was happening. Then you can also talk about that how the Britishers were flooding the Indian market with their finished goods. So basically in this way you will talk about the criticism of the India's colonial economy. After that, no one have written about the second aspect, that what is the impact of such criticism. Almost everybody has forgotten to mention the impact of such criticism. You can talk about the impact in the form that the Britishers have agreed to give 1 million of pounds to the British officers from their treasury rather than from the Indian treasury. Then another impact you can talk about, the idea of Swaraj got strengthened after this particular criticism. You can also talk about that this particular criticism has inspired the moderates and the leaders at that time about the boycott movement, about the use of Swadeshi. In this way you can link each and every aspect with respect to the impact of such criticism also. So basically the demand of question is not about the impact, but if you are mentioning this impact, then it will make a difference in your answers. Okay. Now we will see the second question. So the second question is about the Congress ministries post 1937 elections were toothless tigers. So some of the students have started talking about the history of the election. Okay, they have started talking from 1990, 1924, Swarajist and everything. But the question is pinpointed and it is a 10 marker question, and therefore in the historical background of this question, what you can mention is only about Government of India Act 1935. it is the consequence of this act that we have an elections in the provinces, and in majority of the provinces the Congress won. Out of 11 provinces, 9 provinces were won by the 8 provinces were won by the Congress. So basically this can be your introduction. After that the question is telling that they were toothless tigers. So in toothless tiger you can mention that because of the fund crunch they were toothless tigers. Because of the governor general veto power they were toothless tiger. Because of the zamindars, because they were opposing the agrarian reforms, they were toothless tiger. Then you can talk about the Second World War II was begin to start at that time, and therefore there was a little scope for them to bring any drastic or radical reforms. Now the question is asking about the toothless tigers only. It doesn't mean that you will talk only about the toothless tiger. You will also talk about that what was the positives of 1937 election. So the positives of the 1937 election, you can mention about that how the freedom of press has been lifted, how the prisoners were released. Okay, so these are the different positives of the 1937 elections where the Congress won. Now the question arises that how you will conclude your answer. How you will conclude your answer. So in 1937 election when the Congress won, it gave them confidence that they can run the government. And therefore you will see that when we have the interim government in 1946, we have seen that the leaders of that time have done remarkably well in the terms of interim government functioning. It is because of their expertise that they gained during the 1937 elections. So in this way you can mention both the sides of this particular question. Now the third question, here I will say it is about the lot of foreigners throughout the history have made India their home and contributed immensely to the nation, including during the freedom movement. So most of the students have written only about the persons from the foreign land who came to India during the Indian national movement. Now, when the examiner is checking the copy, he will have 2 or 3 copies in sequence. In one copy or 2 copy, he will find that the students are writing only about Indian national movement. In one copy, he will find that the student is talking about the every aspect of the history. Then obviously, who will get more marks? So, the question is talking about the throughout the history. So, how you will introduce this question? How will you introduce this question? You can introduce this question by mentioning about the enrichment of our culture, enrichment of the culture, arrival of new ideas, new visions that has always helped India to grow more and more. It is because of the foreigners who have came and settled down in India. After that, you can divide your answer into the foreigners who came during the ancient period, the foreigner who came during the medieval period, and the foreigner who came during the Indian national movement. Now this is a 10 marker question, so you don't need to focus more here. No need to focus. No need to focus more here. Here you will have to just introduce the name, that's all. Just introduce the name. You can talk about Kusan, Fahim, There are many names which you can mention here who came to India and settled down. At the time of medieval India, you can mention Al-Biruni, when the Al-Biruni came here. Gauri and all. So basically these are the names. Ibn Battuta came at that time. There are many names which you can mention that they came to India and settled here. During the Indian national movement, you can mention A.O. Hume, Sister Nivedita, Annie Besant, and their contribution. Here you need to go little bit extra, mentioning the name and their contribution also. Mentioning the name and their contribution. Okay? Clear? So in this way, you will fulfill the demand of the question rather than mentioning about the Annie Besant and writing about the Theosophical Society in 7 and 8 lines. Okay? That is not the purpose of this question. So in this way, you can handle this question. Now, so coming to the next question, it is about the Delhi Declaration. So Delhi Declaration, I think that very few people have mentioned about this Delhi Declaration. So what is this Delhi Declaration? This is about the nuclear free world, that's all. So if you know this nuclear free world, then you can mention about the landmark judgment or how it was a landmark document. How it was a landmark document. So you will see that at the time of 1990s, I am not talking about 1990, I am talking about 1990s. Okay. So at that time, there was a race for the nuclearization. Though the idea of nuclear bomb and the nuclear missile came since from 1962, what we have seen in the Cuban Missile Crisis. But in 1990, we have seen that the pace for the nuclearization is growing at a higher rate. So at that time, if any country is talking about the nuclear free world, then in this context, it is called as a landmark judgment. Because this idea or this document has been accepted by the UN Assembly also. So in this way, it has become a landmark judgment. So here there is nothing to know that how you will address this question, because the question is very simple and very direct. If you know the points of this particular question, you can write. If you don't know the content of this particular question, you cannot write. It's very simple question, very straightforward. But the problem here will be in writing conclusion. So it is mentioned in your model answer that what are the features of this particular document, but how you will conclude this question? Tell me, how you will conclude? That can be one point, because it is landmark document and it has impact. So it has guided, not impact. It has guided the India's nuclear doctrine. That's fine. But today, when we are talking about the zone of peace, whenever we are talking about that, what we are talking about today, stability in the international scenario, prosperous rule-based order. So basically, whenever we are talking about the rule-based order, then we cannot talk about the nuclearization. When we are talking about the free zone space to be created, then we cannot talk about the nuclear. So in this way, you can conclude your answer. For a stable, prosperous, rule-based order where everybody will survive without any suspicion, we need a nuclear free world, and in this context, this particular document is a landmark. Clear? तो इसमें तो कुछ है नहीं, इसमें पॉइंट है, बहुत सिंपल क्वेश्चन है. Now we will see the next question. If JP movement was flawed in many respects, imposition of emergency was also not infallible. Comment. So again I saw that the students are writing about the background of the JP. The question is on JP movement, not on the JP. So you can talk about in the introduction the reasons for the rise of the JP movement. Reasons doesn't mean that you will write in the points here. You will simply mention that because of the social and economic fatigue, JP has started a movement of the total revolution against the Indira Gandhi government, or you can say against the government of that time, because it was started in Gujarat, Bihar, and also at the central level. Okay, so here this will be your introduction. Now, how the JP movement is flawed, then you can talk about his extra constitutional measures, that he is talking about the constitution is nothing and the army, and inciting the army and the police not to obey the elected government. Second, maybe there was a problem with the Indira Gandhi government, but you are trying to topple the elected government, directly elected government, you are trying to topple this, then it is flawed. Then he has brought radical elements together from the different communities. He has tried to give the communal figure to this movement. Then you can talk about his idea of partyless democracy. You can talk about his ideas of partyless democracy. In this context, he was, or his movement was flawed. But at the same time, emergency. Indira Gandhi has imposed the emergency without asking to the Council of Ministers. Then this is infallible, not infallible. Then she has not respected the judiciary in the Rajnarayan case. She has not respected judiciary in Rajnarayan case. Then freedom of press was taken. Civil liberties were shattered. Then you can talk about forced sterilization. Now, how you will conclude this answer? How you will conclude? Tell me. Dark phase of democracy, okay? Yes, this is more apt. और मैं क्या कहता हूं कि the emergency, though it was the darkest phase of the Indian democracy, but Indian democracy was so strong that it has survived the emergency too. Or it was a lesson for the successive governments. That is also apt. Okay. Now moving to question number 6. England and Russia were rivals in the struggle to control Asia. So I was looking one answer here, and I find that he has written beautifully this question. Yes, I don't know the name of the student. He has talked about that the control of Russia over the Asia has increased after the end of Second World War. When we are talking about the Russia's expansion toward the Central Asia and to Afghanistan. But the England was a major colonial power, and therefore you will see that there was already a struggle going on between the allied powers with the China in the case of Japan, China, and the Soviet crisis here, what has happened in 1902 with respect to South Korea and all. So basically England was a colonial power which has tried to control the Asia before the Second World War. But Russia was the power who has started to control the Asia after the Second World War. So whenever the students are writing in this way, it is simply giving the impression to the examiner that he has segregated the rivalry, because there was no direct rivalry between England and Russia to control the Asia. Russia was leading its own way, England was leading its own way. So in this way, you can divide your answer and you can say pre-Second World War phase, and then you can talk about because of the spice trade. Okay, the England and the other colonial powers have started to move towards India and Southeast Asian countries. You can mention some of the countries from the South Asia where England has, or Britishers have basically tried to control it. And then in the case of Russia, you can talk about that why Russia entered into Afghanistan. Why Russia entered into Afghanistan? Huh? Yes, basically only thing that provoked Russia to do so, that the influence of USA should not be too strong in the Asian region, because Russia is an Asian region. Okay, so Russia doesn't want that any other colonial power or any other great power should come in the realm of Asia. So in this way, England and the Russia were controlling it. Now the next question is that according to you, who are successful? Obviously, England was successful if you will see in the term of the period that they have ruled over India for 200 years. Likewise, at the same time, they entered into the another Southeast Asian countries and they ruled there also, not less than 150 years or 200 years. So in that case, you will say that England was more powerful. But now if I ask you that in the terms of area under the control, then Russia or England? In terms of area under the control, Russia or England? Do you find that the Russia was or has even entered into the Southeast Asian countries? No. In the terms of area, bhai, Bharat hai. In the terms of area also, you will find that the England is more powerful. England is more powerful. Or therefore, after mentioning this, you can talk about successful according to you is England because of the period and because of the vast area of their colony in the Asia. And in this question, you can draw the map also to show the England's influence over the Asia and Russian influence over the Asia. And that will increase your marks, because the points to be written here is less. Therefore, draw the map and try to fetch more marks. Okay. Now, we will see the next question, that is explorer, trader, missionaries played their respective role in the conquest of the nation. Here again what I saw, that the people are writing about the India, that the Vasco da Gama came, then missionaries came, proselytizing the people, rise of Christianity. So the question is about the nation, not about Asia, not about India. So basically in this question, you need to talk about Asia plus Africa both. Asia plus Africa both. South America also you can say. South America also you can say. Okay. So now you will see that explorers, for example. So why the explorers have started? Why the explorers have started coming to these continents? Renaissance? Renaissance is fine. Because of the Renaissance, there was a scientific temper developed among them, and they tried to find out that whether there is a new place or not on the land. Second is, you can say that they were being funded by the trader. Now we are very busy in preparing and manufacturing the product. You go and try to find out the new market. So whenever they used to come in any continent, you will see that they came with a huge goods and the huge product which is being manufactured in that particular country. So in this way, after mentioning this, you should name, for example, Vasco da Gama in the case of India, Samuel Barker in case of USA, and in case of Africa and all. Likewise, you should talk about the traders. Then in case of India, you can talk about that how the traders came to India and asking to the Jahangir and the Farooq Siyar and all, And likewise, you can talk about how the Belgium king, through the traders, tried to control over the Congo and all. So in this way, you are talking about one point Asia, one point Africa. Then you can talk about missionaries. So missionaries, why they have started? Because they were considering that this is a white man burden. And there was a competition between the capitalist class and the church in the colonial countries, or basically in the powerful countries of that time. So when the traders have started moving to the another places, then missionaries were thinking that it will decrease or reduce their power, and therefore they should also do something to show to the traders that we are not at the marginalized. And therefore the Christian missionaries have started moving into the another continent. Clear? So in this way you will have to mention the role of these three by segregating these 3 points. Clear? Now, moving to the next question, that is the issue of tribal integration has been debated a lot in the post-independence period. Now, in this question, one of the students who is already selected, he has talked about the tribal population is 8.6% of the total population. That's fine. He has also mentioned about the PBTC. That's fine. After that, he has started talking about the debate. So that is also one way of introducing the answer. So after that, what was the debate? The debate was revolving around that whether we should follow integration approach or we should approach assimilative approach. This was the debate. From this debate, what came is Nehru Panchashil. Nehru Panchashil. Then you will talk about the 5 principles of Nehru Panchashil, and in this way you have addressed this part of the question. Now, how far do you think the debate has resulted into successful integration of tribals? So, अब debate में तुम लिख ही नहीं पाओगे, because you don't know that whether we have followed integrationist or assimilative approach, but we know the 5 features of the tribal Panchashil that we have followed. So after writing this, you will maintain the flow and you will talk about this debate has resulted into the successful integration of tribals. Then you will talk about their political empowerment. You will talk about the PESA. You will talk about FRA. You will talk about 5th schedule and the 6th schedule. You will talk about the government programs for economic empowerment, that is credit guarantee fund and everything. Then you will talk about the government program for social empowerment. Then again you will talk about no. You will have to talk about the second part also. No. This is the positive part. Second part, no, there is a problem in health because malnutrition is high amongst the tribals. Education, you will talk about, yes, gross enrollment ratio of India is approximately 100%, but the drop rate is high among the tribals. Then you will talk about rape, violence is high among the ST community. Okay, the people from higher caste are doing this. Then you can talk about economic exploitation, how the new industries are coming into their places and taking their or grabbing their land and violating the FRA. So these are the things we are required to write in this. समझ रहे हो कैसे है ये? Now, the next question is, to what extent the Quit India movement has been the most un-Gandhian movement? So yes, you can start from the timeline of Quit India movement. Timeline of Quit India movement you can start. You will start that it was started after the failure of the Cripps mission from Gwalior, Bombay. Gwalior tank, Bombay. So this will be the timeline. Now, if you will write that in this particular Gandhiji gave the slogan do or die, in the introduction itself, you are killing one point which can be written in the body. Okay. After that, you will timeline के बाद तुम लिखोगे what was the Gandhian methods. Gandhian method अहिंसा सत्याग्रह नॉन वायलेंस लिख दोगे, फिर लिखोगे कि why it was un-Gandhian. Why it was un-Gandhian. ये फ्लो रहेगा. And then you will talk about do or die, violence, youth were participating, creating violence and all, rise of parallel governments, example दे दोगे कुछ बलिया वगैरह का. So in this way you will maintain your flow in this question. Clear? तो इस क्वेश्चन में फ्लो मेंटेन करना इंपॉर्टेंट है. पॉइंट्स तो पढ़ लो बुक से, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. हाँ, पॉइंट्स तो तुम कहीं से ही पढ़ लोगे, प्लस फ्लो ये रहेगा. हाँ, कि why it was un-Gandhian. Then you will also have to present one paragraph that why it was unfair to say that it was most un-Gandhian, because it was because of the failure of the British promises that the Gandhiji was not having any other option. Gandhiji was have to answer the another leaders or the young leaders like Subhash Chandra Bose, Jawaharlal Nehru, that what he is doing. So at that time he has understood the pulse of the nation, and therefore he has understood that it is the opportunity for Indians to give the last try for the idea of the Swaraj. Clear? So in this way you are writing one paragraph of 5 or 6 lines supporting the Gandhian idea. ठीक है? Now, the last question is on Wellesley. Wellesley took a step forward to convert the British Empire in India to the British Empire of India. Examine the policies of Wellesley. Then again here what you can do, you can give the timeline of Wellesley. Timeline of Wellesley. Okay. Then you will talk about the Wellesley subsidiary alliance and its features. Features of subsidiary alliance. After mentioning the features of subsidiary alliance, you will talk about its positives for Britisher and its negatives for the princely state. Because if you will not do like this, then you cannot address the second important part of the question, that is examine the policies of Wellesley in India. Okay. At the same time, the idea of paramountcy, which was started by Warren Hastings, has again given a new hope or has been given a renewed strength by the Wellesley. So in this way, with respect to the policies of the subsidiary alliance, you will have to mention the features, and then examination means its positives for the Britisher and its negatives for the princely states. Okay. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. Okay. So I have checked your copies. I think all the copies have been checked by me. Okay. So in this way, we have completed the history part of our test series. Now the next test series is on society tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.